Hello and welcome to Learn the Bible. We're on post 114, Numbers 1 through 3, the Tabernacle, Part 2. Okay, and welcome back. In our last post, we discussed that the items that were going to be used in the building of the tabernacle each had very specific symbolism that we would later understand as we go through each item. But Israel was a nation that was constantly on the move. That means that the tabernacle had to be mobile. You couldn't just build it as a permanent structure. It had to be something that you could take down and move along with you. It was also going to be the compass that told Israel when it was time to move on. And we'll see that the glory of God would come over the tabernacle, and as long as it stayed there, they would stay put. But when it was time to leave, the glory of God in the form of a cloud would move on, and then they would get up, pack up, and follow. And they're going to spend a lot of time in the desert, as we're soon going to see. So they're going to need this compass to tell them when it's time to go. So when Israel made camp, they always wanted to make sure the tabernacle was set in the center of the camp. It was an extremely valuable structure, but more than just its silver and gold was the fact that it was where they worshiped God. So they wanted to make sure it was in the dead center of this military camp that traveled across the desert for so long. So the Levites, which was the tribe that was given a special role to take care of the temple and the priesthood, they were to camp around it, along with the priests, which come from the line of Aaron, who was the high priest. No one except the Levites and the priests could be in the area except for Moses and presumably his family. So the three camps that were immediate, so the tabernacle was in the middle. Immediately around it were the priests, Moses, and then the three camps of Levites. And the three camps of Levites were split into the three sons of Levi, Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. So at first glance, somebody might say, okay, well, that's interesting. What is the point of that? Well, remember, everything in the Bible comes back to Jesus Christ because it's all the story of one man. So whenever we just take a quick overview of the actual tabernacle, you're going to find that it's lined up, and all the pieces of furniture are set up in a straight line with two pieces out to the side. And if you were to draw lines extending out from each of these directions, you're going to end up with a cross. And at the head of that cross is going to be the Ark of the Covenant. So we'll get more into this as we get into the structure of the temple. But essentially, whenever you first walked into the tabernacle, there was a brazen altar at the bottom. Going up a little bit, there was a brass laver. Then you would come into the tabernacle, into a place called the Holy Place, and then going out to either side would be the table of showbread, representing the bread of life, who is Jesus Christ, and the candlestick, representing the light of the world, which again is Jesus Christ. And then above that a little bit, you'd have the golden altar, and then at the head of the cross, you would see the Ark of the Covenant and the mercy seat. But whenever you begin to read through certain chapters of the Bible, you're going to find things that seem kind of boring. And those are the three chapters we're reading today. I mean, hate to call anything in the Bible boring, but you just get these numbers and numbers and numbers. And you're like, what is the point of all these numbers? So why do we need to know how many people was in each tribe of Israel and where they camped? Again, put Jesus Christ in the middle, you're going to come on with some interesting new findings. So when we're zoomed all the way in, we see the cross. Now let's start to zoom out. And let's look at the immediate camp. So we already talked about the tribes of the Levites and the priests camping around the tabernacle. Now, to the Jewish mind, if I say east, that means immediately east. It doesn't mean northeast or southeast. That means east. If I say north, it means north. South means south. West means west. So now let's see if the tabernacle with all the priests and the Levites were in the middle. Then we're going to see how this is all designed. So God actually tells Moses, I want you to split all the tribes. There's 12 tribes, and I want you to split them into 4 groups, and I'll tell you where to put each group. So the first group was under Reuben. Reuben was the firstborn son of Jacob. He was the son of Leah, and whenever he was born, Leah said, behold, a man. So his symbol was that of a man. So whenever you think of the standards, we did a post on this a few months ago. When you think of the standard or the flag representing Reuben, it was the standard of a man, and there were 3 tribes that were to fly under his flag. So the 3 tribes were Reuben, Simeon, and Gad. Reuben had 46,500 soldiers. Simeon had 59,300 soldiers, and Gad had 45,650 soldiers. So that means the total number of soldiers, not counting the women, the children, and the non-fighting men, was 151,450. So just think of the scale. So 150,000-ish soldiers, and they were to camp immediately south of the tabernacle. So keep that in mind. South of the tabernacle, we have 150,000 men. Then you have Judah's banner. Judah flew over Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun. And of course, Judah you always hear of the Lion of the tribe of Judah being the name for Christ. And even in the first prophecy that Jacob gave his son Judah, he says that you're going to be a lion's whelp. And then he says you'll be an old lion that people will fear to rouse. And of course, that was a prophecy of Jesus Christ. So Judah's banner was that of a lion. And in Judah, there were 74,600. And in Issachar, 54,400, and in Zebulun, 57,400 soldiers. So our total number of soldiers under the lion's standard of Judah was 186,400 soldiers, and they were to the east of the tabernacle. So far we have Reuben with 150-ish thousand soldiers to the south. We have Judah with 185-ish thousand soldiers to the east. Then we go to Ephraim. So Ephraim's banner flew over Ephraim and his brother Manasseh and Benjamin. And remember, Ephraim and Manasseh were adopted by Jacob. So Ephraim's symbol was that of an ox, a beast of burden. And Ephraim had 40,500 soldiers in his tribe. Manasseh had 32,200, and Benjamin had 35,400. This is the smallest group that were under this symbol of the ox. So the total number of soldiers camped under Ephraim was 108,100, and they camped to the west. So just another recap, we have Reuben. He was camped to the south, 151,400 soldiers. Judah camped to the east, 186,000 soldiers. And Ephraim to the west, opposite of Judah, with 108,000 soldiers. So that means that opposite of Judah's soldiers, which is 185,000, and where Ephraim's was 108. So it was a lopsided on either side of it was lopsided from the east to the west. The east had a much bigger contingent, almost double, but not quite. Then you get to the last side. This was Dan. And Dan's banner, initially Dan was called a serpent, but the leader of Dan didn't like that. So Jewish history tells us that he actually fought to make the tribe's banner that of an eagle clutching a serpent. So you'll find that under Dan, there was a symbol of an eagle clutching a serpent. And in Dan, there were 62,700 soldiers. In Asher, 41,500 soldiers. And in Naphtali, 53,400. And the total number here was 157,600. Very similar. And they were camped to the north. And that was very similar to the number that came from Reuben, which had 151,000. Okay, so as a recap, we have the tribe of Reuben with a man with 151,000 soldiers camped to the south, and then opposite it to the north is the tribe of Dan with 157,600 soldiers. So those are fairly even sides, but we have from the east the tribe of Judah, which is the biggest group with 186,000 soldiers. And opposite it was the smallest group with 108,000, that of Ephraim. Okay, so on the surface, these two chapters, they seem quite boring. But when you take the time and actually get a piece of paper and draw out to scale what would this camp look like, you'll see that this actually forms the cross of Christ. You'll actually are going to see that it forms a cross that is used, that can only be seen, by the way, from a mountaintop or from the sky, from heaven, I would argue. So this encampment doesn't seem to make a lot of strategic sense whenever you think about, if a military attacks, why would I have it set up like this? But they didn't need military might. They had the power of God. So when God looked down on Israel, he would see the temple and the tabernacle, which again represents Jesus Christ, in the center of this cross. But the picture doesn't just end there. So we talked about each banner having a symbol on it. So each of these symbols, this was back in post 80 and 81, if anyone wants to go back and review what each symbol meant. But around the tabernacle, we see that there's the banner of a lion in one group, the banner of a man in the other group, the banner of an eagle clutching a snake, and the banner of an ox. That's not the only time you're going to see these 4 creatures in the Bible. Again, nothing is in here by accident or mistake. So when we go to the chapters that speak of the throne of God, you're going to find them in Ezekiel and in Revelation and in a few other places. But the most descriptive are the ones in Ezekiel and Revelation. You're going to find that Ezekiel sees these creatures that have 4 faces. You want to guess what those 4 faces are? Face of a lion, face of an eagle, face of an ox, and face of a man. In Revelation, there are 4 creatures, and each one looks different from the other. Guess what? One is like a lion, the next like an eagle, the next like an ox, the next with the face of a man. What does all this mean? Let me tell you something else that, we can once again review where all the symbolism comes from. And we know that, in the Bible, whenever Judah said he was going to rule, he says that you're going to have a lion symbolizing your kingship. When God directly intervenes, he talks about divinity as being lifted up on eagle's wings. So you can find that in the Bible, where you understand that the eagle is representative of divinity. And of course, a face of a man is a man, and the oxen are always called beasts of burden, so they're servants. So, whenever you think about this, what does this have to do with Jesus Christ? Well, you may not realize this, but there are 4 Gospels that tell of Jesus Christ. On the surface, again, they seem to tell the same story with a few details changed up here and there. But you're going to notice something about each one. If you go in realizing that there is a difference and it's very distinct, you're going to open up the book of Matthew and you're going to hear the proclamation of a king. It says, this is the lineage, or this is the generations of Jesus Christ, the son of who? David. Why does it care to take you back to David and even back to Abraham? 1, to show that he's Jewish, and 2, to show that he's the line of the king of the Jews. So you open the lineage like you would with any king, showing their royal bloodline. And he was introduced as the king, and Matthew is going to show Jesus as the line of the tribe of Judah, the king of the Jews, fulfilling all the prophecies of the Old Testament as the king should. So, and he'll one day rule from David's throne. So that's Matthew. What about Mark? Well, Mark gives absolutely no lineage, because Mark shows Jesus Christ as the suffering servant. Nobody cares about the lineage of a servant. So he shows up, it shows what he did for others, how he served others, how he gave to others, and that's where the ox comes in, representing the service of Jesus Christ and the ox that was sacrificed for our sins. Then you get to Luke, and there's another lineage given. But this lineage doesn't just go back to David or Abraham. It goes back to Adam to show that he's human through and through. It gives his lineage through his human mother, Mary, not his adopted father, Joseph, like back in Matthew, and shows that he is a human and he suffers and he's tired and he goes through a lot of the struggles we go through in the book of Luke. And that's going to be where you have the face of the man represented. And then, of course, John also gives a lineage. And instead of going through any human lineage, he says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. It shows his direct lineage to God the Father. And it shows in everything in John will be his absolute power and his authority. And whenever he would speak, people would fall. And it shows him as God. Now, of course, they all tell the same stories, but from that slightly different perspective. This man, Jesus Christ, he fulfilled all 4 attributes: his kingship, his divinity, his servanthood, and his manhood. And that's the story we get throughout the Bible. No matter whether you zoom in on the tabernacle or you zoom way out, you get the same story. Now, before the tabernacle was built, everyone had tried to have their sins forgiven by making sacrifices at their own homes or wherever they went, and anytime they recognized their own sins. But once the tabernacle was built and functioning, it actually became forbidden to make any sacrifice anywhere else. Once the sacrifice was made at the tabernacle, that is where all sin was paid for. And what is the tabernacle? Where was it placed? In the center of the cross. That means that there's nothing that me or you can do to earn our salvation. That means that once Jesus paid for it on the cross, there is no other sacrifice we can make. Nothing we can add to that. We can simply accept what he did for us. Trying to do it on your own is actually forbidden and unaccomplishable. You cannot obey God's commandments to the full. You have to go to the cross and accept Jesus as your Savior. All right, so that will wrap up for today, and that's just the location of the tabernacle. And hopefully next week or next time we post, we'll get into the actual uh, structure of the building and some of the symbolism there. If you have any questions, feel free to comment below. Thank you very much, and God bless you. Thank you for joining us on Learn the Bible.